Hello.
Yeah. Hi, Duygu. How are you?
Fine, thank you. How are you, Evren?
Thank you so much. I'm fine. Wow, this looks interesting. I opened this in 3 different places,
Oh,
so
God. Well,
yeah.
hello, ladies and gentlemen, again. Welcome to our panel on the impacts of values and morality on sustainable development. For those who see me for the first time today, my name is Duygu Sever Mehmetoğlu. I'm a PhD at Koç University, and I'm working on energy security, energy transition, and sustainable development. Today, I'm happy to be your moderator again, and we are with Dr. Evren Tok. Welcome, Evren.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the introduction, and it's really honored to be with you. And I really appreciate your moderation.
Thank
I
you.
think this is the first time you are moderating something actually like that we are both in, right? Like
yes, actually, we are. For the first time, we are in the same panel with you. We've been working together for so long now, but
because in the past we used to present together, but never ever with any moderation. So
yeah,
perfect.
definitely. Yeah. So if you don't mind, before we start, I would like to give a little bit of information about you.
Please.
So
thank you.
Yeah. Dr. Evren Tok is the Associate Professor and Program Coordinator for the MA program in Islam and Global Affairs at the College of Islamic Studies. And he is also the Assistant Dean for Innovation and Community Development in Hamad bin Khalifa University in Qatar. He has extensive experience in developing disruptive tools in education and learning in postgraduate studies. He is the founder of the very first makerspace in Qatar Foundation, which was built around the concept of green economies, social innovation, and entrepreneurship. Dr. Tok is also the lead project investigator for a Qatar National Research Priorities Program, which is about localizing entrepreneurship education in Qatar. Thank you again, Evren, for joining us. So I have some questions for you on behalf of Green Institute, and then we'll open up the discussion to our audience. So without further delay, I want to pose my first question to you. You ready?
Sure. Yes, I'm perfect ready. Thank you.
So Evren, you've been conducting many projects in a multinational way, and those projects brought together many individuals from all over the world. And you are also living in Qatar, which has become a multicultural hub. In such environments, how do you think we can establish and even sustain social values and moralities despite the differences in culture, beliefs, or ethnicities?
Perfect. Because there's 2 screens right now. I'm getting echo, so it's good actually. So I just want to wait for the second one for some reason. Just
okay.
Strange. In terms of values and moralities, and within this kind of multicultural and multi-ethnic and multinational and complex environments, which are actually quite globalized, and also at the same time they are quite transnational or just local. You can see so different kind of identities there that are in place. So it is not really like a motivation for us to think of like those like common and like the top down and like one size fits all type of like approaches to design kind of projects. But in reality, we can actually look for how there can be kind of like some areas that we can identify some common denominators, and then how these common denominators can be actually discussed in a very deliberative fashion, and then afterwards these can actually result in, or maybe they can be distilled into certain kind of like responses or kind of actions or behaviors that are quite localized. So everyone I know, it became like a cliche that I'm global, but at the same time I'm local, or think global, or act local. I know those cliches, global, or that's one version of it. But in reality, actually, the kind of there are different scales of action, like from even from the like the global, even not even the global. We need to right now think of the universal after the SpaceX and all these things, right? Because we need to think of right now the universe as a cosmos, as a kind of a different scale of action, all the way from that level of analysis, go back to the individual, the body politics, individuals, right? From the very macro to the very micro. There are different scales, and these scales interact. We kind of produce new scales of action. So right now, I believe one of the things that we are learning in the times of Corona is how individuals, groups, communities, regardless of their kind of race, regardless of their nation, regardless of their gender, age, whatever, we are in the same boat. And one way of showcasing that we are really, really in the same boat is to kind of create those kind of scales of action, kind of the spaces that we can act jointly. That is why I think this is the section that the values and morality comes into the picture, because we don't often realize the commonalities, but we often start the differences, right? Of course, for any kind of comparison or comparative work, you need to identify both the commonalities and the differences. If you want to kind of move on, both of them are important. So I believe, in like long story short, yes, there are so many differences, but in order to act together, in order to start any kind of collective action, whether it is COVID-19, whether it's environmental change, climate change, global warming, or racism, any kind of collective action requires certain core beliefs and values at the initial stage, so that different differences can build on these commonalities.
I totally agree with you. And what do you think are these common values or the moral aspect of sustainable development? How the morality and values operate in the path or in the fight towards sustainable development?
So actually, I was right before you. Actually, I was just kind of going back to our one of the the joint projects that you and I were involved in while I was getting prepared for this session, and one of the actually the studies that I've really liked a lot recently, I want to give actually like a reference to this really important study.
Sure.
This is by an organization called Green Faith, and the title of the study is Faith and Climate Change: A Guide to Talking with the 5 Major Faiths. So what this study does actually is that it looks into 5 major leading dominant faiths in the world. And they try to identify what is common between them. So like starting from the different from Islam to Christianity to Judaism to Buddhism, etc. So the idea is actually to kind of to understand what is common. So they identify 5 elements, but I don't want to talk about the 5. But there's one actually element that I really believe it's quite important, which
What's
is actually it's actually the identifying climate change or sustainable development as a moral challenge. So this I believe is kind of to me, this is the core element. So there are different perspectives on this. Like for instance, like if you look at Greta Thunberg, like it just what she did actually is that to showcase like this as a challenge. But one of the things she said was, if people don't believe her, look at what the scientists are saying. So this also reflects the fact that the science is telling us a truth. The science is actually illustrating a problem, a fact, right? But the thing is, acting towards it is not only about science. You cannot engineer people. You cannot do social engineering and suddenly people, oh yes, magic stick, right? Like let's be cognizant of, unless there's like a real
push, right?
Like push, like the COVID-19, right? Like it's because it's the nature of the climate change. It's a more gradual. It's kind of it's coming. Everybody knows it, but it's not tomorrow. It's not like 5 minutes after. But COVID-19 is just right at the door. It came at your door, right? So it's like, so that they're different. So, but the commonality is both of them, they share this kind of moral challenge. So unless we define sustainable development as a moral challenge, and moral challenge is a very complicated and complex term in the sense that it includes other kind of like asymmetries and also inequalities. Like, for instance, one way to look into the moral challenges actually is to look into the intergenerational democracy, right? Like whatever we are doing right now, because people when say this, when we say a moral challenge, people say, okay, you have your values, and your values actually dictate you to kind of act in a specific way and behavioral patterns, and then you know that you'll be rewarded. Yes, these are one part of the picture, and there's that morality that if it comes, morality doesn't have to come from the religion, by the way. It can come from different sources, right? But let's assume we are talking about morality coming from religion. Still, it doesn't mean that it is actually just whatever between you and the God, but it's more about the collective, right? Because that unless you define the moral challenge in a collective way, it will be very difficult to accomplish. It will be very difficult to take it seriously. It will be very difficult to, act towards it.
Yeah, and actually, I personally think that when we just say morality or values, the concepts stay a little bit vague too. I mean, what kind of morality are we talking about? For instance, when I teach about sustainable development goals, I always connect it with global inequalities. And for me, the moral part of sustainable development is about the global inequalities. In one part of the world, people don't have access to electricity, food. In other part, we are talking about waste and inefficiently used electricity sources, obesity, and so on and so forth. What is your own definition of morality in that respect?
Morality is like it's like in Turkish, for instance, or in Arabic, it comes down to the same term, like it's ahlak. Like it's like a it is also very quite intertwined with the term ethics, right? Ethical behavior, right? Yes. So and it's also like a term that's it's really like on a very slippery slope, in the sense that some people might think that there is a certain social code or cultural code that people are expected to act towards it, right? Like but here morality is basically what you see as the right thing to do from a personal standpoint. So there's actually, it of course goes to the kind of the ethical background, the ethical complex ethical decision making, right? That so but the thing is, even in ethics, there are different perspectives to it. Whether you're talking about the ethics of care, whether the virtue ethics, whether you are talking about more interest-based ethics, or like right. So there are different variations of it. But in my view, morality is like, to me, it's more like a pact, or it is like a dynamic process between what the individual considers as right or wrong, and what the surrounding, what the environment, what the society, what the kind of the institutional, social, and cultural, and religious actually environment that the individual is embedded in considers as right or wrong. So it is actually like a morality is in fact like not like a linear path, but morality is more like a multidimensional, and it is more not a one-way street that one says the other one or other not. So it is actually a constant, it's a continuous calculation, it's a continuous kind of like how to say, like a discussion with, even like a cognitive kind of process. It's not like, for instance, morality can take different forms, like according to some people, for instance, like let me give you an example that maybe kind of like one of the things that really bothers me as a kind of a person that's caring about the environment is like when people waste. Okay. So for instance, before COVID, when I used to go to the gym, I used to see people like using towels and kind of especially in the gym, like taking a towel and just kind of wiping very just for 5 seconds, and then afterwards throwing it, somewhere else, and like but then just kind of, it's not a one, like, it's just each time it has to go back to the kind of the washing machine. Remember, just think of the kind of the waste that it creates, the kind of the inefficiency it creates, it's kind of the pressure, that's the footprint that you just kind of, right, it creates. It's kind of really disturbing. So and then, but the thing is, again, it is a kind of like a interaction between you and the system. So morality is like it's pretty much like that kind of tension between you and the environment. In this case, for instance, in my morality, I would never ever do that, because I know that it will have some implications on other people. Someone needs to pick it up, which is not moral. Someone needs to actually put it in the in the machine, and then not again moral. It has to use lots of water and detergent and this and that. They have to buy. So it's like entirely. But then one day, like, I saw someone doing it, and I couldn't help myself, but I just simply told the person that, why are you doing this? You know, like, and not only that, he's just throwing it everywhere. Like, in 1 minute, he used 5 different towels. And then I told him, and he seemed like a kind of very reasonable person, like even way older than me. And just, you know, people say people get a bit more mature when they get older, which is debatable. But and then what he told me really kind of struck me. Like, he told me that there are workers, like they're like the spa for the gym, actually, for cleaning, for the maintenance, and, you know, etc. So he said that he's very concerned about them, because if he takes care of everything, one day their manager will come, and then he will say, okay, you know what, this place is already like clean, so I don't need this worker anymore. Let me fire this person. So then I kind of like thought, this person is just showcasing another kind of morality, and he's doing something. He's kind of acting towards it. So you got my point. So the individual and the structure, agency and the structure, that is what we know this agency structure theories, right? The morality is in between. Morality is like a mitigation between them. Often we think that morality is like the certain value, certain kind of core belief that I act towards it. But no, rather than the definition of morality, this function, this quality of morality is very important. It is actually a continuously redefined, defined, undefined, and redefined in different contexts. That is why it's hard to define.
Definitely. So, and please, sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead, please. Yeah.
Actually, we have 2 relevant questions from our audience. I want to address those. One is also stressing our point, which is morality don't have to come from religion. And our participant asks, how can we encourage people to have values that do not emphasize religious device, but unites humanity towards sustainable development? And our second question is, again, relevant. Do you believe the level of moral consciousness in the world is rising or falling, in your opinion? Why could this be?
Yes, you can write PhD thesis for both questions, especially for the second one. Like, I don't know how to respond to that, but I was just gonna make reference to the kind of the very, very famous study from UNICEF and UNESCO that you are also very familiar with, this global citizenship education, because I believe that the morality is like more and more embedded in these studies, because initially, if you look at Millennium Development Goals and then afterwards Sustainable Development Goals, one of the biggest differences between these two kind of initiatives was the global endeavors was more about the kind of how can we integrate, how can we articulate the value kind of dimension into this whole global projects. And when you do that, then you kind of like, there's this risk of ending up in a conundrum, in the sense that when you put more values, some values will not appeal to other people. So, and then they try to come up, so for sustainable development, for instance, I'm just looking into the kind of the one of the reports of global citizenship education. They emphasize 4 different elements. One is the holism, which is this looking at if you talk about sustainable development, you need to look at it in like a holistic fashion. That it has different components, but these components are in a continuous interplay between each other. And then it's about a dialogue, which is actually speaking to each other, learning from each other, dialogical interaction, right? Participatory and more democratic teaching and learning. And the third one is the critical thinking, which is moving with mind, heart, and spirit, and how can we transform our action. And the fourth element, which is actually reflects of the question that they integrated into this, is the values formation. So how can we come up with a holistic framework? We engage in dialogue, we utilize critical thinking, but at the same time, we do all these things with specific values. And then one of the critical issues actually is that they kind of divided this in a very super analytical way. That's one of the reasons actually I believe the UNICEF and UNESCO, all these kind of global citizenship, I don't agree with every single thing they say, but they do one thing really well, which is super analytical. They really categorize and kind of explain in a very simplistic way, and they distill complexity into kind of simpler units and stuff. So they kind of divided this into two areas, and one is actually I really buy it. The other ones I don't buy it. The part that I buy it really well is they talk about early family socialization and cultural roots. The early family socialization is very, very important. Taking your kids to specific events or giving them training on tree planting. And I see this question from their Savika, for instance, Savika Shaban, the owner of the second question. Whenever I look into Savika's Instagram account, I see her taking her kids to different activities for recycling, upcycling, environmental events, and consciousness events. So the way I see her kids are attaining this kind of cultural consciousness, moral consciousness, is mostly through early family socialization and cultural roots. So because when we are young, when you are under 15, 16, I mean, of course, even 15, 16 is still young, but even earlier, our brains are like sponge, right? It's kind of absorbs everything. So imagine that you are living in a house, your parents actually care about having a zero waste house. This will stay with you forever, right? That's but the thing is, I wasn't my upbringing was not in that kind of a situation, which doesn't mean that I'm terrible. I'm not the person creating waste, but still, it is way more difficult for someone to kind of reverse it if you don't get the education. So, and this part I'm really buying, and I see a lot of people, a lot of families, they kind of educate their kids. So it's more the early family socialization that you can do that. So that is one way to kind of instill values into the youth. The second part that I'm having a problem with is universal values, consensus according to international parameters and legal frameworks. This is the problematic part, because universal value formation is not an easy thing to do, and often they try to do that. But when they try to do that, it's difficult to come up with that. And one of the reasons later they give you the answer. Because when people want to form values, they talk about three issues, actually. First of all, people need to understand what they know, right? The cognitive element, what causes what. So if you don't understand why scientifically climate change is caused, then it's not easy to kind of activate your values, because you don't know anything about it, right? The second part actually is the social emotional part, which is the kind of the awareness and the empathy, right? That's critically important. That is why in design thinking we started the empathy map, right? If you don't empathize with someone, that's difficult to understand. And the third part is the behavioral. So I understand why climate change is happening. I empathize with people who are, or the processes or institutions or countries or any actor negatively influenced by climate change. Then the third stage is behavioral. How do I act towards it, right? So it is this kind of, and speaking to the question of Sabika, for instance, it is this kind of three elements: cognitive, social, emotional, and behavioral. That's actually the moral consciousness, the formation of moral consciousness, I believe. But again, what instigates this? What makes you to kind of to empathize with another? That's the real question.
Yeah, and
yeah. Please.
Actually, I believe and I hope COVID-19 was an important critical juncture to highlight all of these aspects. I mean, showing why these sustainable development goals are holistic, why this is a supranational, supra-religion, and why people need to act on it without considering their differences or their differing cultures, differing ethnicities or religion, right? We have another question from the audience. Let me read it to you. So, should morality in this context be seen as more of what is relevant to a person or more of what the society would see as permissible?
So this is actually what I was trying to say earlier. None of them.
Yeah.
Like it's both actually.
Yeah.
I don't mean none. I mean like not one or the other. It's both. In the sense that morality is like a constant. It's like a dynamic. It's an ongoing negotiation between the self and the other, between the self and the society, between the self and the community, between the self and the people around you. So that is why it will kind of change its formation. It will mutate. That is why like unfortunately it is at the risk of like how to say, like people fix, right? People fixate on certain things. People essentialize certain things. Like when you say the moral behavior is, let's say, using, let's say, half a liter of water or this amount, but it's not the case. It depends on the situation. Like for instance, even if you look at religions, for instance, in religions, if like in Islam, for instance, if you want to take ablution, if you want to take wudu, if there's no water, there is an alternative way to take a wudu through using the soil, right? So look at the situation, because it is a good example of how the moral behavior is pretty much like understood or contextualized. So people might expect you to use water if there's water. So it is still a kind of like a negotiation between you and or interaction between you and the society, right? But if there is no water, then you can use alternative ways. So there are different phases and there are different manifestations of morality that are kind of like discursively constructed in different societies, and that is dynamic, that's interactive. That is the point I was making. It's not individual only. Individual is one part of the site. So it is structured. What the individual is embedded in is another part of the story. But you need both.
And where do you locate the governments in this whole picture? Which tools or mechanisms can the governments use to boost this moral dimension of sustainability among its citizens?
I mean, the governments, of course, it's not easy to kind of do public policies based on morals. It's really difficult for any government to kind of come up with, okay, this is moral public policy. Also, you cannot say there is an Islamic public policy. You can say maybe there are specific policies that are more kind of like designed in accordance to Sharia, like the Islamic law, but it doesn't mean that that policy is Islamic and there's another policy that's not Islamic. Like for instance, there are some studies that are entitled Askari. Hassan Askari has been doing this study called Islamicity Index. They look at different governments and their policies, and they create an index of like how different public policies in different countries actually they are compliant to Sharia. And then when they do that, they realize that the number one country that is most their policies and legal frameworks that are more Islamic is Ireland. So it's so the point. That's an interesting point. So, so policy making. So which means that the policy making in Ireland is way more Islamic than Saudi Arabia, right? So that is why it's I wouldn't say that, but there are different ways. Like for instance, the government can, let's say, introduce a policy. Like they don't change everything. Maybe they don't have money to kind of like to innovate. Maybe they don't have the power to, let's say, impose certain restrictions on the private sector for different reasons or losing their tax base. But they can do easy things. Like for instance, what the Canadian government did like long time ago. I remember I was there. But they said that if you do your laundry after midnight, then it will be at a lower rate. So they just changed something. So because when everybody uses their laundry machine or dishwasher at the same time, it takes more power. It's more dangerous. But if some people use it, let's say after midnight when everybody's sleeping, that you are using it in a more efficient way. So even those kind of certain policy changes, they can make big differences, I think.
Definitely.
But they are supplementary. So if the people are irresponsible, the policies, it's difficult for the policies to fix them. I believe public policies are important, but they're not there to kind of dictate on people. They're there to support the public, right?
Yeah, actually, you are right. And do you think the governments or policymakers, public policymakers, can cooperate with faith-based organizations in that regard? I mean, do you see an interaction between them already? How they can be connected with each other to enforce or to policy making?
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's a lot of faith-based organizations in the world, and one of them is actually Faith for Peace. It has recently been like led by Azza Karam, and they're really like scholars. And there's some think tanks, there's some epistemic communities, there's some translation organizations, there's more like the grassroots-driven organizations, and now you can see like the Pope Francis, for instance, started this Laudato Si, right? The kind of the encyclicals, the Catholic perspectives to climate change. You can see these days like the Jewish Declaration on Climate Change, or Islamic Declaration on Climate Change, or the different actually religious kind of perspectives and organizations. Some of them are actually, of course, they are seen as proliferation, right? Like kind of changing. They have the missionaries and stuff. So there's certain stigmatization on some of them, but some of them are doing a good job. But again, they are parts of a bigger system, right? So it's they cannot by themselves change the rules of the game, right? So they are different elements are supposed to come together and make a difference.
Definitely.
By the way, we are out of time.
Oh yeah, we are reaching the end of our panel. Let's see if we have any other questions. I'm checking the live comments. I think we've answered all of them. Evren, thank you so much. I mean, this conversation could go for hours and hours, but we have limited time. Thank you so much for your insight.
But one selfie, please.
Okay. We use the technology at its best, right?
Yeah.
Okay, how do I pose then to the selfie?
Actually, there's 4 of us here. So, I mean, 2 of you, 2 of me.
Great.
Now people see my head, actually. Like,
we have Linda too, I guess, or
Linda? Who is Linda? Okay, Linda Moss. Okay, great. Perfect. I think this is actually just a signal to us to get out, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you so much, and I would like to thank the organizers as well for this wonderful event, for bringing all of us together, and enjoy your next session. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your moderation.